Be released out of matter and light will come out with it. And that's what a nuclear explosion basically is, right? But in the East, people have considered matter to be a form of mind. So if you stick that into Einstein's equation, you know what you get? You get energy is related to matter, which is actually mind and light. So energy is related to mind and light. Now if the same physics applies to a nuclear bomb, and you apply it to human consciousness, technically you can start a nuclear reaction, or equivalent of one, inside of a mind, just as you can in a piece of matter.
Nice.
You can start a chain reaction inside a person's mind that can then light up and chain react in a similar way with neighbouring minds. And then you've basically got, instead of a nuclear explosion, you've got a spiritual or conscious
explosion, yeah.
This technology is designed to do that. It's designed to spark off a chain reaction in one person's mind in a state of alignment, energy, all that kind of stuff. It kicks off and radiates light, sparks it off in other people's through the internet, okay, and then they all spark it off to their neighbours, and you end up with a consciousness explosion, courtesy of social media and the internet.
Yeah, and what you're describing is beautiful. I'm saying that even the fact that you're sharing that now, is that consciousness explosion is already occurring.
It's already occurring.
That's what I mean. And it doesn't mean that technology is not needed. That technology is part of the explosion exploding. Do you see what I mean? So it's all, for me, it's all exploding.
Let me just show you two kinds of explosions. Here's how atomic explosions work. If you don't put enough pressure on the uranium, okay, then what happens is you end up with a little fizzle and no major explosion. Explosion occurs, but it fades out before it gets to the edge of the bomb, the shell. All right, and that's because not enough control or not enough precision was used in creating the initial reaction. It never got to spread beyond the boundaries. It only lasted inside that little space. If you get it right, however, it'll get to a point where it spreads beyond the shell of the bomb and it goes out into the environment. And here's what's interesting. Up to that point, you need to be incredibly controlling and precise in how everything was going on. If it was just slightly out of alignment, that whole thing was never going to kick off. But when it reaches the boundary of the bomb, the shell, and it starts going beyond that, that is the time you stop exercising control. If you start trying to control a nuclear explosion after it's gone beyond the boundaries of the shell of the bomb, you're going to fry in the process, you know? So all you can do is you have to give up control. At that point is where you have to collaborate with what's about to unfold. Because you don't want to start trying to control a nuclear explosion once it's gone beyond a critical threshold, you know, beyond the bomb. Now, with human consciousness, it's the same thing. Now, here's the problem. In history, people have tried to start these reactions before, and they've all kind of fizzled out, but there's been a trace left over, right? But they've never been able to take it to the point where it crossed over the threshold completely and covered the whole human race. It covered a small group of people.
So is this what you see social media is able to do?
If the right technology was plugged into it, which started these chain reactions, it could go beyond the shell of, if you like, each community or a particular platform. It could actually spread. The light could be radiated to a level where people couldn't control it anymore. In fact, it would be foolish for them to try and control it.
But which is also occurring in terms of the internet anyway. The fact that the internet's even there is part of that explosion of light.
It is.
Talking.
The question
So
is, where are we?
Yeah,
Are we in the control bit, or are we in the collaboration
bit?
bit?
Totally.
And I think we're actually just crossing over. But just to make sure it crosses over, this technology is going to give it a bit of a nudge.
How much? Who else is created any form of technology like this?
You know, I've looked, and I wish somebody already had, to be honest. It would take a lot of pressure off me.
What do you think stopped people doing it before?
I don't think people had combined the different technologies together, spiritual as well as scientific. They'd also not combined together the knowledge of all the dualistic principles that kind of Lynn's been talking about. You know, instead of working with persuasion, working with inspiration instead. Instead of working with competition, working with collaboration instead. Everything's got its own time. Competition, control, it's important at that beginning phase.
Yeah, totally.
Right? But after that, it's important for collaboration to take over. If anybody tries to, you know, exercise control, they're going to hurt themselves. So for the people who are compassionate, they have to go to the people who are exercising control and say to them, look, if you try and hold on to control here, you're going to get hurt. All right? And it won't be us that's doing it. You're bringing it upon yourself.
And that's also showing up the global pain or hurt that you want to look at anyway is only there through separation and control.
It's a symptom,
on
it's a sign
on a huge
that we're
level.
about to cross over that boundary between control and collaboration in terms of consciousness. And people have got a choice what they want to do. Do you want to exercise control of this pain, or do you want to start collaborating?
Yeah, it's a bit like what Bruce Lipton says, which he says we're on a knife edge, so it's like, you either go over, one side at the moment or the other. So you're seeing that knife edge.
People have been saying we're on a knife edge since the 1960s.
But I think we've always been on a knife edge. We're just a knife edge. That's what we are.
Sharp.
We're just sharp. Sharp's army.
Sharp and dangerous.
We're just sharp and dangerous. Sharp and dangerous.
Yeah, no cutting remarks, please.
But do you know what's beautiful as well? Is that it just always comes back to not knowing a thing, but sounds beautiful. Sounds wonderful. It just sounds like another addition to the collective conscious movement.
I would
Can I
say
ask you
that
something?
if it wasn't for the fact that the last 3 years I've been watching it unfold, not just in myself, but in hundreds of people, and separately outside of the world, I've been seeing field effects.
Sorry, what do you mean separately outside of the world?
In the big wide world that isn't directly exposed to interacting with this technology, who haven't actually directly interacted with it yet. And I'll give you an example where I think this is going to go. A few years ago, there was a big study done with the Transcendental Meditation Group in Washington DC about reducing crime in that city.
Yeah, that's right.
It led to a 23% drop in crime, and feature ones led to more. But my question was, why was it just 23% first time round? Why wasn't it 50? Why wasn't it 60 or 70? And I discovered something which is really important, and that is every one of those 4,000 people that came through, they had a common intention of reducing crime and just being in a state of peace, whatever it was they were doing. But every one of those 4,000 people were on completely different life paths. Now, if you've got 4,000 different life paths all coming together, they may have a common intention, but their energies in their life paths are flowing in 4,000 completely different directions. So, although they got their intentions aligned, their life paths were not aligned. And as a consequence, they only had a 23% reduction in crime in that area. Now, if you've got a whole bunch of people together whose life paths are aligned, and then you get them to focus on a common intention, it's the difference between a torch and a laser. Right? You're going to get an exponentially, if not exponentially beyond that, greater effect in terms of the field effect in your environment. So the technology I've created, it helps people discover what their paths are and discover what their purpose is. And once they're in alignment with that, they're like electrons or photons inside of a laser. They all come into alignment. They're much more powerful than those that you see from a torch. Now, if you can imagine taking a bunch of torches and sticking them in one spot, it's not really going to make much of a dent. If you take a dozen of the lasers, you stick them on one point, one in itself is going to be pretty powerful. But if you take a dozen of them, that's going to be immense in terms of the shift that it's going to generate. So the technology is designed over time for people to get into alignment with themselves, discover others that they're meant to get into alignment with, and the community gets into alignment, the nation gets into alignment.
With the idea that your idea of alignment is what other people's idea of alignment is.
No, it's not my idea.
No, not your idea, but in terms of like this concept that alignment is good, is serving the whole, is beautiful.
No, absolutely not.
So
absolutely not. There's no judgment on the alignment. What matters is a given person who's on a given path. And I don't know whether that's good or bad. The question is, if they get into alignment with that, they end up effectively becoming a spiritual laser. Now, it could be positive,
Exactly,
it could be negative.
because it's happened before. We've had a mass negative. It happened in the Second World War. Because you had a nation of people who were oppressed. You then had somebody who tapped into their feelings of fear and being disconnected and all of that, and gave them the feeling of being one again, a nation of one, and that ended up pretty
Well, this is
miserable.
the same principle as the atomic bomb. If you don't get the proportions right in terms of pressure and precision and so on, you don't get light. It just stays dark. There's no release of light. In the past, in humanity, the same problems occurred. Light, there's been a pressure, there's been a reaction, and there's been a response, but the overall proportions of things, the fuel, the pressure, everything else, were not right for that chain reaction to spread beyond small communities and extend out to the whole of the world. Right? I knew that was always going to be a problem in the future. Everybody can start a revolution, but Was it going to fizzle out before it affected the rest of the world? Or was there some medium that could be used to ensure it spread out across the rest of the world? And can we use mechanisms to do with supportive energy and challenging energy in conjunction with incubational energy? Those three, get those in the right proportion, and then you'll see that thing not just happening to Wall Street or in the Arab countries. It actually has a medium because of the proportions to actually travel to every nation in the country.
Are you hoping right now that there are enough people who have an alignment in a positive way,
Here's
not a natural
Here's
resonance?
the maths.
In a negative way.
Here's the maths, okay? TM effect, in order for it to affect the population of the world, it needs about a couple of thousand people to do it. That's enough to affect the city. The technology I'm working with is exponentially less than that. So instead of needing, say, a couple of thousand people to affect the whole city, you would only need around 30 or 40.
And what's the overall? Just to summarise, because we've captured some of this on camera. What's the overall purpose of this in one sentence?
Spiritual chain reaction.
Spiritual chain reaction. Simon on the sofa on tour with Jazz. Jazz is going to be sitting on the sofa very soon, and you will get to hear more of what this magical man has to share, and you'll be listening to Kate Osborne as well. Thanks for tuning in. Pret de Manger, Central London. A hell of a lot of alarm bells going on. Police sirens. It's been hectic because we are creating an evolutionary light bulb.